Okay, this is actually a lot. Like this together, I was going for silver because I feel like they wear silver in the show, but it's a lot together. I need you to know that I see that. Oh my god, hey, welcome back to my Stagey YouTube channel. If you are meeting me for the first time, hello. My name is Mickey Jo and I am just obsessed with all things theatre. I'm an independent theatre critic based here in the UK, and this is my Stagey YouTube channel, where I have recently been reviewing shows that I have seen both in the West End and on Broadway. If you would like to know more about some of these shows and would like to hear my thoughts on them, make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel. So last weekend, I was very lucky to be invited to attend a press preview performance of Aint Too Proud, The Life and Times of the Temptations, the new musical transferred from Broadway, now playing at the Prince Edward Theatre in London's West End. I knew very little about this show going in. I knew that it was another jukebox musical, and specifically a biopic-style jukebox musical, one that would use the music of a particular artist in order to tell their story, in this case the story of a particular band. Think The Drifter's Girl and Beautiful and A Beautiful Noise, the Neil Diamond musical, rather than the likes of Mamma Mia, We Will Rock You and Bat Out of Hell. So this one obviously tells the story of the Temptations, who I know by name. Could I tell you any songs by the Temptations? No. Listen, don't at me. I am musical theatre to the bone. I didn't know who Sarah Bareilles was before I saw Waitress. That's how bad we're talking here. But thanks to this show, I can now tell you an awful lot about the Temptations. And obviously I knew a lot of these songs. I just didn't know that I knew these songs, or I didn't know that they were by the Temptations. Again, do not at me. But in today's review video, I'm going to be letting you know what I thought of the show. What is it like? Which other jukebox musicals might I readily compare it to? How were the performances? And would a theatregoer who doesn't necessarily love jukebox musicals still enjoy this show? We're going to answer all of those questions in today's video. But before we do, if you enjoyed today's video, like I said, make sure to subscribe to my channel for plenty more Stagey content, including many more reviews coming very soon. And if you would like to be able to find out my opinions about these shows before everyone else, I post early and exclusive content for my channel members. There is a link in the description. If you sign up with that, it is just £2.99 a month. Aint Too Proud is only just opening in the West End, but if you have had the chance to see it already in London, or if you saw the show on Broadway or elsewhere, let us know what you think of it in the comments section down below. Now, let's talk about Aint Too Proud. So like I said, this is a biopic jukebox musical. We are using the music of the Temptations in order to tell the story of the group, particularly one defining member of the group. The best way to describe this musical is by taking the musicals Motown and Jersey Boys and putting them in a blender, and I feel like you would get Aint Too Proud. Structurally, it is so familiar of Jersey Boys and actually features much of the same creative team. It has the same director, and so this is not a surprise. In terms of the tone and the music content of the show, this is where it bears a more striking resemblance to Motown, because the Temptations were a huge part of Motown. We also get Berry Gordy featuring in this, we get Smokey Robinson featuring in this, we get the Supremes, all of whom were also featured in the musical Motown. In fact, many of the cast are appearing in this show having previously appeared in the London production of Motown. Some of them are actually playing the same characters that they played in that show. Like I said, going into this, I did not know this show, I did not know this band, so I really didn't know what to expect. They have this initial set that goes up, and the band saunter on and start performing. They're being the Temptations, they're doing their thing, and it was when one of them stepped out of line to speak to the audience, and he did this at various points throughout the show, and the lines would be something to the effect of like, the thing about success is, and then he'd go on to say something profound, and it would introduce some narration, and it was at that moment when he did that for the first time that I thought, this is Jersey Boys. I don't know if I've ever been super candid about my opinions about Jersey Boys on this channel. It is not my favourite show because I feel like it falls short of what it could achieve dramatically. I have some similar feelings about the way that this show is put together and how that sort of inhibits its inherent theatricality, but we're going to get to that later in today's video. For now, I want to give you more of a sense of what this show actually does. So where Jersey Boys has each band member taking turns to narrate the show, this just has the one. We see almost everything from the perspective of Otis Williams. We see how the band was initially formed, and then we see them going on to achieve success and enduring challenges, all from his singular perspective. For much of the show, I questioned why that was, and it felt a little bit one-sided that we weren't hearing from the other members of the band. The Osmonds is another musical that does a very similar thing, where the whole thing is from the perspective of Jay Osmond, one of the band members. But by the end of this show, this one does a really good job of justifying why it is from his perspective, in quite a powerful way, in fact. For the most part, the songs are performed diegetically. What I mean by this is that within the context of the musical, there is a reason for them to be singing. They are singing because they're performing on a stage. They're singing because they're on a TV soundstage recording a performance for a TV show, or they're in a recording studio recording a new song. There are only a couple of moments where the characters sing the music off the Temptations in order to articulate their own emotions non-diegetically. This is another thing I don't love about this particular genre of musical theatre. I really like those moments where lyrics can mean something personal to a character and we can really sing our feelings. I feel like that's broadly what musical theatre is, at least for me. Otherwise, it starts to feel like a play about music featuring that music. So I really do enjoy those moments where the songs can mean something slightly more, but for the most part, they are performed within the context of being a band. That being said, they are performed very, very well. We move through several decades in this show. The pace definitely slows up and speeds down. We dwell on the really important years, and then the wheels start to spin faster and faster and faster. Again, it's very clear as to why that is, especially in the second act of the show. I will say the first act feels quite long. The second is considerably shorter. So if you are going to see this show and you grow concerned by the interval about how long this show is, the second is shorter, do not worry. One thing that surprises me is, and I don't know if this will change over the duration of the show, like I said, it was still in previews when I saw it wasn't invited press preview, I haven't broken the theatrical law, don't worry anyone, but they didn't have an encore performance after the bows, which is usually a feature of this kind of a jukebox musical, where people can then stand up and clap and maybe sing along at that point in the show. I know this is a controversial topic at the moment, but they came on, they bowed, and they left, and then there was more of a feature on the members of the band who remained on stage and continued playing. So I'm going to tell you some more about this show, but at the same time I'm going to tell you what I thought. So let's find out now how many stars I give this show. So while it didn't really speak to me personally, like I said, this is not my favourite genre of theatre, I can still respect and appreciate a well put together show. This is still a 4-star piece of theatre. There were moments in the first act where I wasn't sure it was going to get all the way to a 4-star rating, but it is undeniably a 4-star piece of theatre. So much of how the creative team has put this together is just so slickly done. For the amount of time that they cover, for the amount of band members that feature, the Temptations has over time featured a great many members of that band, and they show you an awful lot of them. The fact that they can get through all of that, the fact that they can feature that many well-known songs is all very, very impressive, and the way they do it is very slick. The set doesn't change all that much. We have a few different locations that are brought on. We have like an office space, we have a recording studio that comes in, and we have this screen that moves up and down. But it's not like a whole screen. What you get is essentially like this letterbox view of a screen, but as it scrolls, the thing that it's showing you also scrolls, so like you're seeing something through like a letterbox basically, which is very clever video design. I want to specifically shout out whoever did this video design, because I think that's very technically impressive work. Peter Negrini is the name I seem to be finding in the programme. Bravo to Peter, that's some excellent work. While I'm talking about the creative team, like I said, the pacing of this show and the tone of this show is all very carefully balanced by Des McAnuff. He also directed Jersey Boys, and you can absolutely see the similarities tonally between those two shows. They both do a very careful job of balancing the ultimate crowd-pleasing and entertaining intention of the performance with the inevitable darkness and heaviness of occasional moments of the plot. Thankfully, when anything becomes too emotionally charged, we can always have a happy song and dance about it, and the dance in particular is so impressive. It would be one thing if they were just singing as fabulously as they are, but the dance moves, the choreography that these guys are doing, I think some of the most impressive in a jukebox musical I have ever seen. And the fact that it's the Temptations themselves, as they are fronting these big numbers, as they are singing full out, that they are also giving you this crazy high energy choreography, it boggles the mind. The choreography is by Sergio Trujillo, and it's so good. It's just galvanizingly thrilling and completely indicative of the era as well. Everything about this in a jukebox musical needs to speak to this particular decade. It needs to transport us to that time, and the choreography and the music arrangements and the orchestrations are so completely recognizable and so transporting. Throwing another name at you, Kenny Seymour was responsible for the music supervision and the arrangements. Again, excellent work was done. So there's something I really want to say about this show that I feel like I've been dancing around, and it has to do with the way that this show is structured. And I feel similarly about other shows like The Osmonds and like Jersey Boys. Because we have this narrator character who is telling us what happened retrospectively, we as an audience encounter everything in that show retrospectively. We never meet anything head on because each situation that follows, each scene that arrives, we've either just been given some context to it by our narrator character or we're about to be soon afterwards. And it prevents us from getting too emotionally invested in anything because we know that everything we're seeing is past tense. You know this anyway because it's a show that was set several decades ago. But the way that it frames it to you as a piece of entertainment feels more like a documentary, like a music documentary, than it does a story, than it does a narrative. And that isn't helped by the book that really seems to have this reluctance to dwell on anything too heavy. And there's some really heavy themes at various points in this show that are just lightly touched on before we immediately ease off. And it's not to the show's benefit because those themes recur and they come back. And you wish that we'd really delved into them the first time so that their resurgence and their worsening and their impact later on in the second act of the show inevitably would have more of a dramatic effect. This is going to be a spoiler for something that happens in the first act, but there is one moment where Otis Williams walks in on one of the members of the Temptations doing drugs, and this happens very briefly before he turns to the audience and says he was addicted to the worst drug of all, the spotlight. And that to me is almost a laughable line of dialogue because I feel like the actual drugs he's doing were also quite bad. And to couple that scene with that piece of dialogue and then make no commentary on the fact that he was doing drugs backstage before the concert, which will absolutely come back in a big way in the second act, that feels like a huge missed opportunity in terms of developing his character. And carrying on into the second act, we start to navigate an awful lot of death because we go through various decades and there's a lot of death that happens. Some of this tragically young, some of it a little bit older. And I just feel like a little bit more consistency in the way that these death acknowledgements, I'm going to call them, because we don't actually see a scene where anyone dies, but we just acknowledge their character has died. I feel like these moments in the show, if they were staged more consistently, it might be a better stylistic choice because we have one incredibly striking moment where we see a character sitting down into an armchair. There's a very brief lighting effect, a blackout, the light comes back up and the armchair is empty. That's like a sudden shocking moment. But none of the other death acknowledgements are portrayed with anywhere near the same kind of evocative passion. We have a moment in the first act where a character is kicked out of the band, so he steps forwards onto a platform and the platform, track scenery style, wheels him off one side. And it's a comic moment because he's there being dumbfounded like, wait, where am I going? As he's wheeled out of the frame. But when we arrive at that same character's death in the second act, he leaves the stage the same way. And that obviously isn't a moment that is meant to be played for laughs, so it's a little bit odd for that to be staged in the same way it was in the first act. It's the little things like this that keep me from getting completely emotionally invested in the story. Like I said, so many moments in the book arrive at these personally dramatic situations and circumstances, and we just don't explore them, not nearly enough. We spend significantly more time talking about the logistics of the music industry than we do about the personalities and the lives of anyone involved in the story. And it would be my preference if the ratio of those two things were a little less skewed towards the music side of everything. But again, this show isn't necessarily for me, and this may be for a very different type of theatre goer. I do want to talk about the performances because ultimately this is the best part of the show. The passion and the energy and the dynamism with which these guys are performing, it's fantastic. So the glue holding everything together emotionally, Sifiso Mazabuko playing Otis Williams, giving you such a strong acting performance at the center of the show as he grapples with everything that has happened over his career with the Temptations and as he recalls it. His is the character who narrates everything throughout, and he has pathos and gravitas. And while his is the starring role, it certainly isn't the showiest because his wasn't the flashiest character or the largest personality, not by some margin. One who did have a slightly flashier personality was Cameron Bernard Jones. He plays Melvin Franklin. He gets some like tender and somber moments, but for the most part, is just a wonderful comic presence in the show and an excellent bass vocalist. He has this very low spoken delivery that gets a lot of laughs and various different lines. His voice is just so mellifluous, it's lovely. Kyle Cox plays Paul Williams, whose character I believe was described as like the heart of the group, and he kind of provides that presence on stage as well. He's incredibly endearing, he's a very sweet presence in the show. The way he executes the choreography is very technically impressive, and there are so many increasingly tense scenes between these band members, and he consistently infuses them with this charm and levity that makes them much more enjoyable because of his presence. Next up, I have to talk to you about Tosh Winogomord as David Ruffin. He is absolutely a showman, both within the context of the show and just as Tosh on stage. He is so well suited as a performer to this type of show. He has done Jimmy Early and Dreamgirls. He has just finished doing The Drifter's Girl, and now he is stealing the damn show in this show at the Prince Edward Theatre. It's so firmly within his capabilities to explode onto the stage and give you a high octane vocal, high adrenaline choreography. He is jumping into splits. He is spinning around in place as sweat is like shaking off of him because he is committing so hard. He absolutely has that energy of those classic music performers who just leave everything on stage. The vocals are delicious. The acting scenes, which are tempestuous and challenging, are again just completely committed to. I think his is absolutely my favourite performance of this show. I really hope that it's recognised come award season. That's a long way off yet, but I do think every single thing that he is doing on this stage is so impressive, and he is committing to it completely wholeheartedly. Few shows in the West End can aspire to the kind of electricity that this one has when Tosh is singing and dancing on stage. But he is not the only one bringing you vocals and more than a little bit of tension. Mitchell Zangaza completes the original Temptations lineup as Eddie Kendricks. He has a beautiful voice. He has some incredibly high vocal moments in this show that are very impressively sung, but he's also, up until recently, been playing a lot of younger roles. He was understudying Evan Hansen in Dear Evan Hansen, and this feels like a definite step up for him in terms of getting to play a more mature character who really faces off against Otis, again a complex character, but as well as that, as a performer, delivering everything you need in those group performance numbers. He's fantastic, as are they all. Many more very strong talents in the supporting cast, many of whom multi-role, playing a bunch of different roles throughout the show. We have the Supremes, we have Berry Gordy. Ryan Carter is very charming in both of his roles. He plays Smokey Robinson in the first act, he plays Damon Harris in the second. And Naomi Catillo as Josephine gets one very nearly show-stopping vocal moment, one of the few moments where somebody other than the Temptations gets to sing a little bit of their music. And I think that that's one of the standout moments of the show. Let me tell you about some of the others. So I never saw Motown in the West End, and I know that Dreamgirls has its roots in the story of the Supremes, but when the Supremes arrive in this show and do a medley of their songs, you just want for there to be a Supremes musical because the music is so delicious and their performance of it is fantastic. There's a couple of more theatrically very exciting moments in the second act. There's one song where the Temptations and the Supremes are both performing together in front of television cameras, and we're seeing the whole circus of all of that with all of these cameras moving around as they perform on a TV set. And there's another where the remaining members of the band are singing while those that have decided to leave the band and pursue solo careers are orbiting around them and performing choreography. That's another really well-staged number. So who do I think would enjoy this show? I feel like this is yet another jukebox musical for people who really like this genre. And there's a great many people who do, who wouldn't necessarily go to see a Les Mis or wouldn't necessarily go to see a more emotionally overwhelming kind of a show. I do think the way that this is written, the way that it's structured, we acknowledge the emotions and everything they go through like those music documentaries do. We arrive at a part of the story where it's like, and then they face some challenges and they had some dark times, but you know that within 2 minutes that segment is going to end and we're going to get to hear another fun song and it's going to go back to being about success and another tour. So if you like the music of the Temptations and that is what you are going for, you are going to be incredibly satisfied. If you liked Jersey Boys, if you liked The Drifter's Girl, I dare say you will also enjoy this show as well. It's a hot topic right now, so I am going to address it. I was at a Saturday matinee performance and you could hear that a few people were singing along to the song My Girl, which is one of those songs that just kind of, you could expect that that might happen. It wasn't anywhere near me, and it wasn't to the point of distraction, but I wasn't sat near to those people who seemed to be. For the most part, nobody sang that I could tell near to me throughout the show, and it didn't readily invite singing along opportunities. In the world of biopic jukebox musicals, this does feel artistically like one of the strongest, but I still think that it has its theatrical shortcomings as far as I'm concerned. But those have been my thoughts about Aint Too Proud, the life and times of the Temptations. I hope that you enjoyed today's review video. If you did, make sure to subscribe to my Stagey YouTube channel for plenty more coming very soon. I hope that everyone is staying safe and that you have a stagey day. For 10 more seconds, I'm MickeyJoTheatre. Oh my god, hey. Thanks for watching, have a stagey day. Subscribe!